Replace the ignition coil in a Dodge Intrepid. The Dodge Intrepid has a direct ignition system that requires 3 ignition coils. This part converts the battery's energy to a higher voltage required to fire the spark plugs in the vehicle's engine. A defective ignition coil will cause your engine to stop working, misfire, or even fail to start. Fortunately, replacing the Dodge's ignition coil is fairly straightforward. All you need are a few hand tools and a few minutes and your engine will be running smoothly again. Check if the ignition coil is indeed defective. Check the vehicle's ignition coil for any carbon tracking. Check the insulator boot of the spark plugs as well. If you find any tracking, you will need to replace the coil. If you have a spark tester on hand, you can also do this test. Take out the ignition coil and remove the car's upper intake. Attach the spark tester onto the ignition coil, then put back the intake. Crank your car's engine and watch the spark tester. You should see a blue spark jumping the gap in your tester. If there are no sparks, you will need to install a brand new ignition coil. Prepare the supplies and tools that you will need to replace the ignition coil. This project will require a set of screwdrivers, a torque wrench, a clean cloth, a roll of masking tape, and a new ignition coil. Because production of the Intrepid has been discontinued, you may have some problems finding a replacement for this component. Go online and search for stores that still carry replacement parts for this Dodge model. When you search for the parts online, make sure that you inquire for an ignition coil and a coil pack. Some stores consider these car parts to be identical, while others differentiate between the two. Ready the Dodge Intrepid for the replacement of its ignition coil. Shut off the car's engine and wait until it has completely cooled down before popping its hood. To avoid any injury caused by electrocution, disengage the negative cable from its battery. To avoid accidental connection, wrap the end of the battery cable with the clean cloth. Don't forget to engage the car's emergency brake to keep it from rolling away as you work under the hood. Find the car's coil pack. It is attached to its cylinder head. Using some masking tape, mark the ignition coil wires before unplugging them from the coil pack. Unfasten the electrical connectors of the wiring harness from the pack. Take out the defective ignition coil. To be able to slide out the coil pack, unscrew the mounting screws using an appropriate screwdriver. Gently pull out the ignition coil pack from under the bracket used for mounting. Isolate the defective ignition coil that you want to replace. Loosen any fasteners keeping it in its place. Position the replacement coil back into the Dodge Intrepid's coil pack. Make sure that you put in the new coil exactly the same way that the old one is installed. Refasten all the screws that you removed in the previous steps. Tighten the screws used for mounting the pack. Use a torque of about 9 foot-pound using your torque wrench. Once all the parts have been put back properly, remove the tapes that you used for labeling. You are now finished replacing your car's ignition coil, so begin reattaching the battery cables that you disconnected. Restart the engine. The replacement ignition coil should transmit sufficient power to the car to start it up with no trouble. Take the Dodge Intrepid for a test drive to ensure that the ignition coil has been correctly installed.